Es la fiesta de los charros en mi tierra. Preparen su buen morral. Dicen al vaquero que vaya y nos abra las puertas del corral. Vamos a ensillar los cuacos, compañeros. Vámonos a vacilar al Valle del Río Grande tan hermoso, tierra de mi cantar.
Charro Days is the annual celebration in Brownsville, Texas, of its Mexican heritage. 1997 marks the 60th anniversary of the creation of Charro Days in this border community. Back in 1937, local civic leaders were still trying to cope with the continuing ills of the Great Depression, and a civic celebration offered an opportunity to both lift spirits and attract tourists and dollars to aid economic recovery. An idea conceived by local businessman Kenneth Faxon inspired a group on the Pan American Round Table to organize a fiesta committee and plan a pre-Lenten celebration for February 24th through the 27th in 1938. Faxon, long acknowledged as the father of Charro Days, headed the committee.
The Depression hit Brownsville a little bit later than hitting the rest of the country. And it sort of coincided with the 1933 hurricane that just had great destruction of our area. And they both hit about the same time, and it was, people were in real bad shape. Up the valley, they were beginning to get winter visitors from up north. They'd come down and spend a great deal of their time. And the old talk up there is, don't go to Brownsville, it's just a Mexican town, you wouldn't want to go down there. Well, in 1937, they were having a Pan American Round Table meeting, and the ladies had dressed up as they do in the costume of the country in which they represent. And I don't remember whose home it was. I should slap myself for not remembering, but Mr. Ken Faxon was there with his wife Bernadine. And he looked around and he said, you know, wouldn't it be a colorful thing if every citizen of Brownsville put on a traditional Mexican costume? If they want to call us a Mexican town, let's capitalize on that point. And somebody else liked the idea, and they began to whip that thing up. And then they decided that, well, let's don't do it for one day. Let's, you know, if we're going to go to all the effort, let's make it several days. So they finally decided on a pre-Lenten carnival atmosphere, much like Mardi Gras and down in Rio and what have you. So this is the way they got it kicked off. They applied for their charter in November that year, and I believe the charter that I saw was issued in January of '38, and they got it off the ground. Now we have to back up again, because a lot of what they learned during the dedication of the Port of Brownsville in 1936, from the tremendous number of committees that they had put together to put on this festival of transportation, or whatever they called it, cavalcade of transportation, I believe it was called. And they had children parades, they used the Army, they had everything in the world going on for several days there. So they had learned from that how to get themselves organized. And from the very first, Charro Days got off with a bang, and it has been a great asset. It brought in dollars that were badly needed, and it was an effort by everyone in the community.
A glance at the program for the first fiesta reveals an exceptionally ambitious plan for 4 days of fun, beginning with fireworks on Thursday evening and ending with a Noche Mexicana across the border in Matamoros on Sunday night. In between were 3 parades, street dances, and a grand ball, motor and sailboat races, a bullfight and a rodeo, and a concert by the Banda de Artilleria, all the way from Mexico City.
The people of Brownsville took a different attitude than the Chamber of Commerce did. Since it came during carnival time, we made it in the first 2 or 3 or 4 years a community thing. there was dancing and singing in the streets. Everybody who played, little groups, were playing in the street corners in downtown Brownsville. All of this was going on. And everybody dressed up in Charro dress in those days. But at the beginning it was a spontaneous thing. Everybody was involved in it. Those who could play, played. Those who didn't dressed up and had fun.
Brownsville wasn't as large then, and when it first started. And everybody went downtown. You got to see everybody, but you just mingled. It was marching in the parade. That was that was a highlight. But it was all nothing formal, and all like that. It was just a good time.
A unique feature of the first Charro days was the grito. This tradition, which continues today, was begun by A.A. Daddy Hargrove, who gave a free-form shout of joy to begin the celebration. Hargrove gave the grito for many years and served 1 year as president.
Daddy Hargrove, he was a guy that just put his heart into it. He let out a grito, and he just put his heart into it, and he just kept, it would go on and on and on and on. Well, my first grito, after I made it, I lost my voice because I didn't know you gritoed from the stomach. I did it from my throat, and I lost my strain, my voice. I lost my voice completely.
Kenneth Faxon observed that we have probably made some mistakes, but thanks to the spontaneous enthusiasm and wholehearted cooperation, not only of the people of Brownsville, but the people of Matamoros and the entire valley as well, we have succeeded in doing much more than we had hoped for in our first year. Kenneth Faxon served as president of Charro Days for the next 2 years and served again several years later. He remained on the committee for decades. The format for the first fiesta had been so successful that only a few changes were made. More and more folks were able to obtain and wear Mexican costumes, and beard growing was mandatory. Smooth-cheeked males were arrested and hauled before the brush court.
When my fiancé, my husband-to-be, O.B. Garcia, came to visit me with a mustache and a goatee, I was quite surprised. From a bare-faced man with all of that face hair, it was just a goatee. It was very neat. And I asked, what is going on? And he said, well, for Charro Days. And then he began to explain the formation of the organization and the reasons for it. And he said, everyone is supposed to, everyone that wants to, take part. And some of the men are growing full beards, some are just the mustache. And the whole idea is that we are going back in history to celebrate the early Valley. And in those days, in 1938, mustaches weren't found very. I mean, not many men would let a mustache grow. I think we associated mustaches with the villains in the movies. Possibly that was one of the explanations. At any rate, that was my first encounter with the words Charro Days. I loved it. I thought it was just the grandest thing. He looked great, but he hated a goatee, loved the mustache. So for second Charro Days, by then he already had the mustaches. He kept that, but the goatee was gone and never came back. Much to my chagrin, because I really thought he looked very handsome.
Some floats in the parades were horse-drawn, and 5 cents would buy you an ox cart ride through downtown. Almost taken for granted was the participation of military units and the band from Fort Brown. Soldiers paraded in authentic Zachary Taylor uniforms of the U.S.-Mexican War. From the very first, the Charro Days Fiesta was able to capture the fascination of national and international audiences. National Geographic covered the first celebration, and the following year, moviegoers across the nation saw Charro Days scenes in Paramount and Universal newsreels. Macy's Latin American Fair in New York featured a Charro Days theme in 1942. Time and Life magazines printed spreads on the border fiesta. All three radio networks broadcast the balls coast to coast, while the Voice of America and the Armed Services Network carried Charro Days events worldwide. In 1952, two networks telecast the main parade.
The outside interest of the country was incredible, because after just 2 or 3 years, we had the people from Life magazine, part of Time Life Corporation, and even National Geographic was said to have come. When the word got around that Life was coming, actually it didn't come the first year, you might imagine. We were pretty new at this. But one of our friends got on the porch in the Cromac building, and he got some kind of tripod and a box. It was just a wooden box that he'd painted brown, and he stuck a wire into it and began to wind it like the photojournalists we see in the movies. And then the people up on the porch roof with him would say, "Look this way, look this way." And of course, everybody would preen and, here's Life magazine. And it was fun. But Life did come eventually.
Children have always been an important part of the Charro Days events. The first celebration had a kids' parade, costume dance reviews at the high school, and a carnival. Over the years, participation in the children's parade reached 12,000. Members of the Pan American Round Table taught and demonstrated costumes and dances for the children. Soon, the Fiesta de los Niños provided a venue for students to demonstrate folkloric dances learned in the schools.
The word went out early on, we're going to have a children's parade, and we would like as many people who can to participate. And pretty soon it became competitive among the principals, but my children are going to be better than your children. And so that's how it pretty much began. And it was just a marching en masse. This is Sharp Elementary, this is Skinner Elementary. And we'd have banners, and the children would march in costume. Pretty soon we began to have the floats and the dances. In fact, I think the dances were first. I remember in one particular one, we had no motorized ways. Everything had to be walking because of the children. And one of the teachers got Victrola, winding up Victrola, and had it had a little wagon and was pulling it along. After the first 2 or 3 blocks, the needle fell out, and that was the end of the music. But the children danced anyway, because the teachers were so enthusiastic about it.
Brownsville's sister city of Matamoros continued to play an important role as a partner in Brownsville's commemoration of its Mexican culture. Citizens of Matamoros had actually initiated the concept of a bicultural celebration over a century earlier, when merchants from that city dressed in traditional costumes for a trading visit to Anglo colonists in the Corpus Christi area. Artillery and cavalry bands from Mexico City continued to perform in concerts and parades. Noche Mexicana and bullfights continued across the Rio Grande, and in 1950 the Fiesta Parade crossed the river for the first time to entertain Matamoros crowds. By 1954, the international bridges were open for everyone to cross during Charro Days. In 1958, Governor Norberto Trevino Zapata of Tamaulipas joined Texas Governor Price Daniel for the celebration. Governor Daniel later proclaimed Charro Days a major contribution to the Good Neighbor policy, benefiting all peoples in the Western Hemisphere. A major challenge during the early years was posed by the coming of World War II. Wartime restrictions in rationing resulted in replacing the Grand Parade with a special Charro Roundup. Many events focused on the military or provided free admission for the boys in uniform. 1945 events included a mock bombing of Tokyo at the athletic field. In 1946, the return of parades with floats also included a visit from war hero General Jonathan Wainwright. The World War II era was also the big band era, and some of the biggest came to Brownsville to perform at Charro Days, bailes, and balls after the war. The earliest dances were held on the patio at the El Jardín Hotel, then during the war at the Fort Brown Officers Club and the Aransas Compress. After the war, the Fort Brown Motor Pool was remodeled and served as the site of dances until the Civic Center was constructed in the mid-50s. The big-name bands began to arrive just after World War II. Javier Cugat, the Rumba King, in 1947, and Desi Arnaz of Babalu fame in 1948, a few years before the I Love Lucy show hit television.
Well, I imagine you have heard of the Javier Cugat coming down and Desi Arnaz. It was an incredible occasion because those were New York and Hollywood bands of great renown, but they came. The money was there and they came, and the people loved them. They would throng the dance hall. I believe the first one was I was going to say the Civic Center, but there was a big barn of a place that I imagine Charro Days owned, and the dances would be held there because the people came from all over the valley, came from everywhere, and people came in costumes, and there was an awful lot of good times going on, people dancing and visiting and drinking. It was very festive because here we were dancing to these marvelous orchestras that we would never have had a chance to do so.
Many other top-name bands came to Brownsville during the years when the dances were broadcast on the radio networks. Band leaders included Skinny Ennis, Tex Beneke, Les Elgart, Ralph Mathieu, Jimmy Dorsey, and Freddie Martin and his Coconut Grove Orchestra. Despite the well-developed tradition and the national and international attention during the early period, something about Charro Days seemed to grow stale during the 60s. The street dances ended, and the event seemed less a people's celebration.
Then the thing became commercialized. I remember, I think the first year was when Randolph Wild, who had an orchestra, was hired, and instead of the dancing in the street, there was a big dance at the patio of the El Jardín Hotel, and of course, it wasn't open to everybody. I remember we were hired to play there, and at first they wouldn't let us in. After that, Charro Days changed, I think, a great deal. Matamoros people took great part at the beginning. Later they didn't do so anymore because they felt that it no longer had very much to do with Mexico or with Mexican culture. So it has varied, I think.
Perhaps the formula had become too static, and the event a victim of its own success. The advent of television and the evolution of taste for entertainment proved to be a challenge for civic celebrations throughout the United States and not just in Brownsville. Those who have been part of Charro Days over the decades are fond of pointing out that whenever there had been a lack of interest, something had developed to revitalize the activities.
Every time that something new is born or Charro Days found something new, and includes more people, it regains strength.
A major addition during this era was the development of the Mr. Amigo organization, which annually selected a prominent Mexican citizen to honor and originally had no connection with Charro Days. Early honorees included former President Miguel Alemán and movie star Cantinflas. Hurricane Beulah demonstrated the danger of holding the Mr. Amigo events in the fall, so it was rescheduled to coincide with Charro Days. It also became apparent that the Mr. Amigo the public wanted to see were entertainers, and the organization obliged. Charro Days gained a new round of international attention when Raul Velasco, host of the popular Siempre en Domingo television show, was chosen as Mr. Amigo. He featured Charro Days on his show. Almost all of the big names in Mexican entertainment have come to Charro Days as Mr. Amigo honorees, attracting large crowds from both sides of the border.
I remember Lola La Grande visiting Texas Southmost College. And I remember Cantinflas at city meeting. My husband took me. He was spectacular. The man was such a down-to-earth human being. And all of them, I imagine, have been great selections. I've never heard anyone say, why did they pick him or why did they pick her? I think that aspect of Charro Days would have died if they hadn't picked good candidates.
A more recent development in reconnecting the public to Charro Days has been the Sombrero Festival, brainchild of Danny Loff.
I can tell you this, that it wasn't a situation I sat down and, on the coffee table and just planned this whole concept. I mean, there's no way it works that way. And in fact, this has grown almost out of proportion, domino, into a much bigger thing than anybody would have expected. And I can go back to 1985, where I put my costume on, and I lived here at the time, and I kept calling all these college friends that had recently moved back, and it's Charro Days, let's go, and where are we going to meet? And nobody had a costume, nobody was ready to go, and I dragged a friend of mine, Wesley Reed. I said, no, you are going, I gave him a hat, I gave him a peon costume, and we marched down and got down to the end of the parade site at the bridge, and we were looking for our friends and everybody else, and just nobody. In fact, people were laughing at us because we had costumes. Everybody was just gawking at these two gringos walking up and down the street. That was, and at that time, we walked across to Garcia's to see if anybody was around. And that was the old stomping grounds, and nobody was there. And at that time, we moseyed on to the American Legion. I had heard that down the American Legion at the Fort Brown area there was some action, and as we got up there, there was action. There was probably 15 to maybe 20 trucks backed up in a big circle, and they were having a fajita cook-off, and that was Charro Days. And you think they're going to offer any fajitas to anybody else? I mean, fajitas are expensive. It smelled good, and they're drinking a couple beers and having a little fun there. And no more than probably 60, 70 people. And it was funny because in the middle of this big ring, there were two winter Texans playing horseshoes. And that's, I asked my buddy, I said, Wesley, you get on the other side, I'll get on this side, and I'll play you. We teamed up with these winter tourists. And my brother, Gary Loff, was sitting under a mesquite tree with one of his cronies. They're drinking a beer, having fajita, which was, it was the occasion. And that was Charro Days, and that was it for us at that time. And, of course, this time the parade was still going on. And I walked over to him, and at that time, I just created this fierce monster in me. I said, this will never happen again, and that's what made me sort of furious and made me start Sombrero Festival in 1985.
The Sombrero Festival takes over Washington Park for the duration of Charro Days and provides a wide array of food, events, and music in a carnival-style atmosphere. One of the most popular Sombrero Festival events has been the jalapeno eating contest, clearly a rigorous challenge. The music shows feature popular rock, country, and Tejano entertainers. This aspect is carried over to the traditional dances, which have in turn attracted new generations of dancers. If history is any guide, Sombrero Fest is only the most recent development in the evolution of Charro Days, and we can anticipate additional changes as the event adapts to the needs of a new century. The story of Charro Days is one of cultural preservation and transmission in an atmosphere of celebration and sharing. Despite the stress and strain inevitable in producing an annual event of such magnitude, cordiality and goodwill have been the hallmarks of the Brownsville Fiesta. The Charro Day spirit endures and contributes to the growth of civic pride and community spirit.
Everything is cyclical, Mardi Gras is cyclical, and all those things are cyclical. And I continue to see Charro Days in that vein. already it's been named one of the top attractions in the United States. And if we continue to do what we're doing, I think we're going to continue to get what we're getting, which is very, very good results.
I feel that it's really important just because I grew up here. You know, I understand the Mexican culture, and I want it to grow, and I want, you know, the kids, my kids, anybody in Brownsville to understand it, and it can let it continue to grow.
I just don't see how it can be stopped. It's come this far, and if you will look at our sister cities that have comparable celebrations, like the Laredo Washington Days celebration, the San Antonio War of the Roses, Parade of the Roses, they have been going on longer than we have, and they're still there. And I think Charro Days is just going to be one of our 2000 celebrations. Too many people enjoy them for them to die. Too many people have grown up with them, that it would be quite a blow to Brownsville for an organization like that to disappear. I just don't see that.
The main thing that I see that's so good right now is that we have all of the kids in the school system. We've got some 20,000 kids that are involved in Charro Days. And when you have 20,000 children involved in it, and they're learning the dances and wearing the costumes and finding out where the costumes came from and all of those things, we're keeping history and traditions alive that might somehow die if it wasn't for this.
It has been said that life goes in cycles, and maybe it does. The children of Charro Days are now the parents of Charro Days. A third generation is now witness to a celebration that has grown from an idea to promote our border culture and our friendship with Mexico to a celebration that is now internationally known. And although changes have occurred, the heart of the celebration remains. It still celebrates a people, a community, and a border area rich in culture and heritage, and the children will continue its tradition.
Es la fiesta de los charros de mi tierra. Preparen su buen morral. Dígale al vaquero que vaya y los abra. La puerta del corral. Vamos a ensillar los cuatro compañeros. Vámonos a vacilar al valle del Río Grande tan hermoso, tierra de mi cantar. China que cantas y bailas, cántale a mi corazón. Tú reinarás en la fiesta o acabo con toda la función. Es la fiesta de los charros de mi tierra, bella y de fama mundial, que cada año celebramos con orgullo, porque no hay otra igual. China que cantas y bailas, cántale a mi corazón. Tú reinarás en la fiesta, o acabo con toda la función. Ya con esta me despido, mientras tanto me llevo en el corazón el orgullo de la fiesta de los charros, el tema de mi canción.